So welcome to our session, Agroecology and Organic Production. First of all, I would like to thank Teresa, Petro, and Mark for supporting us here. And so we have a section of 5 presentations, from which 4 are to be here in the room, and we will have one online one. We have already managed to have the first 4 ones, and you are waving. So is it already sent now? It's on a pen drive, so Mark will pick it up, and so we are on the safe side. All the 5 presentations are then available. So we have always about 10 minutes presentation and then about 5 minutes questions, so that we keep more or less in time. We have a little bit of buffer at the end, as there is not a 6th one. And by this, I would like to ask Sarah to start. Sarah is a British one, grew up as Eswatini, now living in France. Did interesting, you can already come there and look whether everything is nice with your presentation. Started with maths and continued with geography, is now in the Alliance of Biodiversity International and International Center for Tropical Agriculture. And in this frame, I think she will have her presentation now. Please.
Great. Okay, is this working? Yes, good. So I'll be talking about catalysts and transition pathways for agroecology in the Global South. And this presentation was prepared in the context of an agroecology initiative. Closer? Okay, yes, sorry. Part of an initiative that has recently started in the CGIAR, or the new one CGIAR, as we are shortly to be called, on agroecology. So we know that agriculture is at the root of many of the global challenges that we're facing today. And this is particularly true in the Global South. This is just a smattering of headlines that have come out in the last, mostly this year actually, but in the last 2 years. But agriculture is also at the core of the solutions of these challenges. It covers 40% of our world's land area. And as we've heard about already, and many of you are fully aware, we need agriculture to produce more than just food. And I think most of you will know these already, but I just wanted to put them up in case any of you didn't. But on the left, we have Gleesman's transition pathways, which are really at the core of what agroecology is about. And on the right, we have FAO's HELPLY, so high-level panel of experts, creation of principles that underpin agroecology. And there are 13 principles, and these are at the root of what it means to take an agroecological approach. And crucially, it's not just about changing practices on farm, it's also about going beyond that and transforming whole food systems, which means changing behaviors from the farm through to the consumer in how we think about food production and how we choose to eat and purchase that and so on. It shows promise, but there are some major barriers that need dismantling. There's a lack of enabling environments, meaning policies, meaning business models. There's been an overfocus on technical solutions to agriculture's problems, and we need to think more about what social changes, economic changes, and political changes can be made to catalyze shifts towards agroecology. There's also been a focus on research at the farm level, and this has meant that we don't fully understand how to transform food systems beyond the farm, so value chains and actors all along those value chains. We also have focused heavily on yields as a measure of success in agricultural systems, and this does not capture the true cost of production or the benefits that certain agricultural systems can provide. And finally, as mentioned already quite a lot in this conference, research has tended not to be co-created enough with local knowledge systems and adapting to local context. So this is also something that needs to be overcome to make agroecology a reality. Okay, so enter the CGIAR Agroecology Initiative. Now, of course, it's not the only initiative that's doing research on this topic. It's one of very many. But we are quite happy that it's the first CGIAR initiative that is specifically on agroecology. It started this year and it's due to run for nearly 10 years, so to 2030. And our initiative is focusing on 7 countries. So we have Burkina Faso, India, Kenya, Laos, Peru, Tunisia, and Zimbabwe. We have 5 work packages. And the goal overall is to help actors in food systems within each of these countries in specific sites to transition towards agroecology. And to do that, the first activity is to set up agroecological landscapes, living landscapes called ULs, where we collect and help actors across the food system to engage with one another. And then we are setting up a monitoring framework that will try to monitor holistic outcomes of different actions that are taken at the farm level and food system level. But we also recognize that this requires enabling environments, like scaling agroecology requires suitable institutional arrangements and policies that support farmers and value chains. So work package 3 is focusing on that, which policies really have success when it comes to scaling agroecology. Sorry, that's work package 4. Work package 3 is on business models, also a really important area and currently still quite poorly understood. So what business models can help support agroecological food systems? And finally, work package 5 is on behavior change. And that's really about what creates behavior change for different actors, so producers through to consumers. What would incentivize you, me, to actually do things differently? The key research question we're trying to tackle, or one of the key research questions, are what are the catalysts of change and possible transition pathways towards agroecology in the global south? And I think one of the novelties of this initiative is that we're using quite similar methods across 7 countries. So that's it has been done by other projects in the past, but not so comprehensively and at such a large scale. So hopefully it will give us some new lessons learned for transitioning in other places. And really at the core, we recognize that we're not the first initiative. Actually, in some ways, the CGIAR are coming to this quite late, even if a lot of projects that the CGIAR has been involved in over the last decades could be called agroecology, but under another name. So it's not implying that this is the first time anyone in the CG is working on agroecology, but there are a lot of initiatives out there and social movements and local actors that are fully aware and already practicing agroecology. So we are doing our best to complement these initiatives and work with them rather than reinvent the wheel. And that means we are very much learning from and being guided by local partners about how we take the next steps in the next few years. And we recognize that actually transitions are not straightforward. First of all, what's agroecology? How do you decide when something's agroecological? It's not really yes or no. There's a gradient. Generic solutions about how you achieve a more agroecological system are really quite rare. It really depends on the local context. And you can have a number of different catalysts and a number of different barriers and sort of lock-ins that exist. And that will change how a food system moves from A to B. But in theory, the sort of catalysts that we expect to help shift systems towards agroecology are, and I've mentioned some of these already, supportive policies and also removing perverse subsidies and counterproductive policies, action research, social technological support, new business models, financial mechanisms, and social movements. And then there are also many ways that transitions can happen. So in this initiative, we're focusing on 3 plausible transition pathways in the global south. And these are agricultural intensification. So this is generally where a system has low productivity and low external input. We expect that the most promising strategy initially for them to move towards agroecology is likely to require agroecological intensification. So more intense inputs, but but done in a way that is compatible with nature, and also scaling and connecting to markets and consumers to bring in the social and the economic aspects that are really core to agroecology as well. Second transition pathway, redesign. So this is generally where a system has low profitability and a high external input use. So expect that redesign of that system is going to be required to shift it towards agroecology. And then finally, conversion, where you're in a petrochemical system, as was termed yesterday, I like this term, where it's generally high profitability, high external input use, and we need to convert it to something that is more sustainable, more ecologically friendly, but can still deliver to farmers the production and the profits that they need to make a successful livelihood. And so there's many different innovations. And by innovation, I'm talking about technologies, farming practices, policies, and business models, and other catalysts that can bring about these changes. But how do they really happen from place to place? So we only just started, and these are just initial ideas and findings. But in Zimbabwe, we had a kickoff workshop in April this year, and this is one of the all sites, so agricultural living landscape sites, where there is predominantly maize, vegetable, and livestock production, low chemical input use, low productivity. And what stakeholders are telling us, so local actors that we've consulted with so far, could help these systems are things like integrated pest management, vegetable production, stimulating honey production, labeling organic produced vegetables, so you create market pools, and then public investment to improve crop livestock integration and rangeland management. And through this, the all is currently coming together to have a shared vision of how to intensify to a more productive system. And then one other example, and I realize I'm close to time, is Tunisia. So again, early days, but we have an all in the Rahal and Sers areas where it's predominantly livestock production, low diversity, high agrochemical input use. So here we're thinking, with the stakeholders, we're thinking it's more suited to redesign of the food system. And this might happen through strengthening farmer cooperatives. So improving the quality of forage services, strengthening links between cooperatives and consumers, enhancing crop livestock integration through forage crops, and so on. These are just ideas. I think I'll skip this slide because we don't have time, but I can come back to it. And just to say, research has now started in all of these countries. So if you're actively working there, please reach out. We'd be happy to involve you, see how we can collaborate. And a few takeaway messages are that, like to emphasize, we really think that having holistic metrics is the future. Not easy though. There's many transition pathways that are available in every place. This is a strength of agroecology in our view, not a weakness. But there's currently a very limited understanding of what enabling environments and which interventions catalyze change. And this is a research gap that we're hoping to help close through testing, understanding, supporting, and monitoring agricultural transitions in 7 countries. But we recognize it is going to be challenging. We have multiple disciplines, multiple countries, partners, actors, scales, methods, and steep learning curves. While there's very strong knowledge on certain areas with the partners involved in the agroecology initiative, there are a lot of things that we also need to get up to speed on. If you're up for this challenge, we already have some postdoc positions advertised or soon coming up, and there's also master students and PhD opportunities out there. So get in touch. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Sarah, thank you for your very nice, comprehensive presentation and also for the invitation. We will have a short discussion. So where are the people with their questions?
Thank you, because otherwise it's usually a sign the presentation was not good. So that's a relief.
So I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but Laos, I saw Laos on the map. What's happening there?
So we are working, I think, in the south, and it's with fish rice integration systems. And as I understand it, there's not a lot of of existing work on agroecology in Laos. It's not my specialty. The leader for Laos is Marc Dubois, who I'm happy to put you in touch with if you're working in Laos. But so yeah, we've got quite a lot of work to do, I think, to create a interest in agroecology and really shift things towards a different type of system in Laos, as I understand it.
So first of all, thank you for the presentation. I would like to know, one of the techniques was the market pool. So how to generate this market pool via governmental programs, or like to attract investments into guaranteeing that farmers' products will be consumed? Is it maybe like using, for example, in a school meal program and some other initiatives?
Actually, yeah, that's a great example. That isn't something that's currently been thought about in Zimbabwe, but indeed, that's something that works very well in other countries, notably Brazil. At the moment, it's mainly about labeling and consumer education campaigns to highlight the importance of agroecological produced food. So yeah, that's where we're thinking of going. But public procurement and market school canteens, I think, is really fantastic. Yeah. Okay. Am I off the hook?
Yes. Thanks a lot for presentation discussion, and we will keep in touch with you. I think many people. We will come to our next presentation, and this is given by Sig Snop. Already? No, I think it's not yet. And so Sig is a US citizen, professor for soil and crop ecology at Michigan State University. Also joined CIMMYT now. And so she wants to shift the green revolution reputation into something much more sustainable. And we are looking forward to your presentation, Sig. So here is your mic.
Hello. So you found it. You found M1. Very good. You guys passed the first test. Very good. Right. So now what is agroecology? This is even more interesting. So I have been working in participatory action research in agroecology for some 30 years, since I was about 10, actually, if you count back. So I'm really pleased to be able to talk about experiences from Southern Africa, including my fabulous new CIMMYT, they're not new, but they're new to me, CIMMYT team, including an agroecologist that was on that last one, and Frederick Baudon, and an agroecologist that might be surprised to be called an agroecologist, and that would be Christian Thimfelder, and many others, Santiago, and amongst others. So I just want to give a shout out to them. So challenges and opportunities. The reason I put this up here is because if not now, then when? Agroecology and new ways to do research, which is what I'm going to talk about, that build on indigenous and scientific knowledge together, are needed in a changing world, whether it's markets changing or climate changing. It is my firm belief, and that's partly because of this work by Jonathan Reich and others, that it's very local. And so our traditional approaches, I'm an agronomist, so my traditional approach, randomized control trials, which we invented, economists in the room, by the way. You think you invented them, but we actually did, back at Rothamsted 180 years ago. So randomized control trials, we control one thing and change, but can that work in a changing world? Because things are hyper local. That means that one experiment right here where you changed fertilizer rate and the one next door where you change fertilizer rate have different outcomes. So probably we have to empower people and look at their own innovations and their own adaptations and understand systems and complexity of systems to support change. So participatory action research is an approach building on back all the way to Pablo Ferraro and others, so also in Central America, but not the Green Revolution, right? But actually learning by doing. Farmer-centric, context-specific work, right? So participatory action research is locally adaptable, and so it can scale in the sense that we always used to say, oh, you can't scale participatory research. But you can. I mean, how else do changes happening? yields do increase, not always nutrition security, but yields have increased. So how has that happened? Farmers have made changes. Systems have transformed, not always in sustainable ways, but intensified ways. So agroecology includes this bit about farmer and scientific knowledge coming together, according to Mendez and others. And I totally agree, as well as ecology. And what is ecology? Everyone says, oh, nature-based solutions, environmental. Wrong. It's the science of systems. In the 60s, that's what Odom and others came up with. And so we have a science of systems that can help us in agriculture. Complex systems, depends where you draw your system boundaries, but we can use that. We have social movements, we have practice, and the practice side and the science side, to me, it is about discovery. It's not just about adaptation through participatory action research. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in this short time frame, and also talk about learning labs. What do they look like? So just one view anyways. So recently, this just came out, not in the frontiers that are taking over our lives. They're asking us to review every other day. No, this is the Frontiers, American Society of Ecology, Frontiers in Ecology Environment. And it's about participatory action research as a way to do discovery. In fact, I think it's the only way to do discovery for applied sciences, for applied agroecology. When we want to make differences in lives, guess what? We have to include humans. It's agriculture, folks, culture. So you have to include clients in order to come up with new ways. So in our work in Malawi over some 20 some years, we found through working with farmers that we brought agroforestry options, we brought short duration common bean, new groundnut, new soybean varieties for legume diversification. Which do you think farmers picked up? How many people think it was new varieties of crops that they could sell? How many people think it was agroforestry? So is it agroforestry? We interacted with farmers for years and years, demonstrating different types of mixed farming systems with trees. And I love trees, but trying to get them to interact and not outcompete your maize, and these are maize-based systems, was a challenge. So in the end, we found that farmers kept adopting the short season, really short season, new varieties of beans and soybeans and groundnuts. So that's nice. But the trees are needed for the nature's benefits, right? For environmental benefits. Luckily, through farmers' interventions, through looking at their innovations, we found out that they were adopting things like pigeon pea, which they treated as a tree, some of them, right? They ratooned it. So they regrew pigeon pea as a bush for several years. So farmers had a middle way. That's kind of an approach. Maybe we should look at middle ways more, but most of our research, unfortunately, we developed short-statured varieties, short maize, short wheat, and there's nothing wrong with short wheat. I think it was part of the Green Revolution. I see nothing wrong with short-statured crops, personally, but you may, in fact, need long duration, tall things with deep roots and so on. So innovations by context equals performance. See, agroecology, we have a formula too, not G by E by M, but maybe related. It's options by context equals performance. So how can we better understand that? Well, I think that we can have an infrastructure. And maybe that's part of what we're building with these living labs, right? But let's be systematic about it. Let's think about what sort of innovations, genetics, agronomy, post-harvest, forage, crop livestock interventions. We have to understand the context. So if we're on farm, we need to measure the soils, the environment. We have better tools to do that now, right? Farmers' performance. We might be looking at, what do farmers care about? Maybe they care about soil carbon in that area. I've had farmers that really show me, hold a handful of soil out and say, look, I've improved my soil organic matter. I'm like, you can't see that from your eye, but they can. Some farmers can see the tiny black specks that are improved soil organic matter. Well, we have tools that can help with that too now. So you might be measuring soil carbon to understand your context and as part of the rating. I don't know, we'll see. So we do have the beginnings of an agroecology living lab, and this includes Zimbabwe and some not in the same location as the agroecology initiative there, but we hope to link up at some point. Building on some of what have been called mother-baby trials by some crazy farmer in Malawi. I was there the day he named it. I called it the Central Satellite Trial Design. That went nowhere. Central Satellite. But a farmer said, this central trial, that's the mother trial. This is where the researchers are controlling. These were the baby farmers, and he was proud of that. He says, I'm a baby farmer, and I'm trying this here, and babies grow up, so come and see what I have here. So he called it the mother-baby trial. So this idea of just having thousands of on-farm observations and on-farm tryouts and linking them systematically with our research, which might be at a research station, might be at a central location. That is a powerful tool, right? And it's being used in different ways. But one of the exciting things, in the past, we did this more as action research. And it was really fun looking at the farmer in the eye and interacting with him about the soils or her. But now we're getting to the point where we can also engage thousands of farmers, right? And try and understand what is the innovations they're doing and try and link them together for rapid throughput. And maybe even to improve some of the research that we do through feedback loops. Like I said, I pushed agroforestry for years and years, and now I push pigeon pea. If you know me at all, you know I'm going to bring up pigeon pea because it is a shrub that gives us the services we want, but it also gives us food. So it has a place. Not everywhere, obviously. Maybe we need lab or some other types of legumes, or maybe even some sort of perennial grain like perennial wheat or perennial sorghum. But my point is that farmers taught us that they were not interested in that context in trees. They were interested in shrubs and vines. So we can learn new things and try new things instead of endlessly pushing on a string in agronomy. So how do we accelerate learning over time? So soils, we have handheld devices that now allow us to give feedbacks to farmers on how so they can measure pH and carbon faster, and to communities and to extension. So decisions and even researchers, so that we don't have to wait months or years before we get the data back, and maybe we can start using it in our systems. So finally, this is just an example of us linking local knowledge with farmer knowledge. And I really think we have to start documenting better in a living lab, however you want to do it. And I'm really interested to see what you're thinking about what an infrastructure might look like. Documenting local indigenous knowledge and scientific knowledge so that they can interact with each other. And this principle of learning by doing, what does it look like? Is it including modeling to show farmers and communities where new types of what the future of climate change might look like in a particular area and options for that? So finally, I just think that these are the principles, and we have an infrastructure in Southern Africa and CIMMYT that we're trying to build, and we hope you will join us and with our national partners. But we hope that others are building, and I think this agroecology initiative is a great example, are also building this new infrastructure, because plant breeders have their speed breeding and their molecular biology and such. So I think agronomists and agroecologists, we need to have systematic ways to learn with farmers. And I look forward to learning with you about that. And I hope you have a few questions. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Sig, for this very lively presentation. And I hope we will have a lively discussion. I especially liked that you said living lab and then you said learning lab. So that's a nice one. So what are the questions here? Yes, you have a question.
Hi, just a very basic question, but pigeon pea, I understand it's like a small shrub. Do you consider it agroforestry? If it's produced? Yes.
If I were ICRAF, I'd claim it because it's everywhere in Southern Eastern Africa. Even people tell me it's not there, and it's in women's gardens. It's there. Even in West Africa, it's all around. But it's actually a tall shrub. But we've made it into basically what I call pathetic soybean, because it becomes very short statured, the early generation types, which have not been adopted. So-called improved varieties. And thanks for the question on pigeon pea.
Could you expand a little bit more on the mother-baby experiments? What is this methodology exactly about?
Okay, so the mother baby came out of our work with farmers on participatory action research with farmers in the late 90s, where then CIMMYT took it and developed a lot of maize varieties, because what it allows is just systematically linking farmers' own tryouts with researcher-driven work, and it can look different types of replication in others, and there's different statistical approaches, but it's just basically a linking of supporting farmer innovation with systematic long-term experimentation that's researcher-driven, so you can understand things like slow processes like soil carbon and erratic processes like pest invasions. If we don't have researcher-driven long-term experiments, we wouldn't, and observational data, we wouldn't understand things that are slow. So we need researchers, absolutely. But to understand innovation, I tell you, we need farmers and we need to support innovation. And obviously, what we used to call participatory research and gender analysis needs to be front and center.
So thanks a lot, Sig. So that was also asking people then to stay and get into touch with you. And I think this is very useful. Many people are now working with Living Up, including our group. So thanks a lot. Giving a clap to her again. No, not yet. Now we are, yes. Now we are coming to Mark Cotter. I don't have such a introduction for Mark as I had for the others, but I remind Mark, I think we had some Hohenheim time together, or at least you have been in Hohenheim also some moment. Okay, that is what I can say about him. And I saw that you are with Fiebel now, and that is also very interesting. The floor is yours, Mark. You get a mic somewhere. Where is the mic? Where's the second mic?
Oh, there's Mike. I guess I think I found it here. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. And also thank you to Sarah and Sig for these first two presentations, which is going to be quite a challenge now for me to match somehow. Especially after these visionary and forward-thinking presentations. Basically, what I'm showing today now was, well, we did field trials. This is a bit the very short version of it. But we did field trials for quite some time already right now. So what I'm presenting here is the work not of me, myself, but of a team of 40 scientists that have been working since 2008 on long-term trials. And when these trials were set up, it was still named organic farming. Well, we still call it organic farming, but if we would apply for funding right now, we would call it agroecology, because that is exactly the approaches that we're doing here. And I'll explain to you why. We are running the SysCom program, which is farming systems comparison in the tropics. And we have 3 trial sites. One is in Bolivia, where we are working on cocoa, both agroforestry and full sun systems. And there we are working very strongly with farmers' cooperatives and integrating their approaches and what they are doing and how they are doing cocoa in the systems into what we are doing in our long-term experiments. All of our long-term experiments are being accompanied by participatory on-farm research, where we do something similar like these mother and baby or satellite trials, depending a bit on the context in which we are moving. In Kenya, we are working in a crop rotation system of maize, beans, potato. And there we are also comparing organic farming approaches with conventional approaches, and then on different input levels, because quite a lot of the farmers in the region do not have the possibility of going into a high input best practice system, neither organic nor conventional. And so we also had that included in our study design here. And finally, India, we're looking at cotton-based crop rotation systems. So cotton, wheat, soybean, wheat in the conventional systems. And we're taking also a look at both organic and biodynamic treatments, but also conventional and GMO conventional systems, and seeing, okay, how do they perform and how are the long-term effects? And this is what we're interested in. Also there, we're working together with farmers' cooperatives for these satellite trials. And for Kenya, we do not have a strong cooperative we're working with, but we do have these mother and baby plots, and we are working on participatory market chain development programs and spin-off projects there in order to a bit further develop the understanding of how these systems are working and where they might be going. Now, when we were summing up what we had learned over 12 years in 2019, we came up with some of the core findings that you can see here. So green are the organic treatments, brownish oranges, depending on the beamer, are the conventional treatments. And some of the key messages that you can see here is, for example, in India on the right-hand side, you can see that soybean was performing more or less the same in all of the systems we were taking a look at. And in cotton, for example, it was the case that we had something of a yield gap of 10 to 15% between organic treatments and conventional treatments, which is okay-ish, but we said, okay, this needs to be better. For Kenya, the situation was a bit more difficult. In Kenya, we have both the high input and the low input systems, again, in organic and conventional. And there we can see that for maize, for example, organic high and conventional high are actually pretty much on par. And on the long term, even a little bit better for the organic system. But what did not work out was potato. So Irish potato, as you can see there, conventional yields were far higher there. And that was mostly due to pest pressure and systems that were not far enough adapted to the local environment. And this is exactly what the learning was that we took into account in 2018. The colleagues started to improving these systems and going more towards a system approach on how to organize these crop management cycles and how to work with that. And then we started integrating cover crops. We started integrating better targeted IPM, integrated pest management systems, and also working with improved composting in order to alleviate some of the drawbacks that we could still find after 12 years. And these are some of the upcoming results. The colleagues are still working on the data for 2021. So I'm having here some data from 2020. And part of the crop rotation here in Kenya is also French beans. And as you can see, over the time, French beans production in the green organic systems was always a bit lower than in the conventional systems, sometimes quite strongly lower than in the conventional systems. The green line is the average of the region that can be expected to be produced by farmers there. And now, after taking these more systemic changes into account, we were able to see quite substantial yield increases also with the French beans, mostly due to getting rid of pest pressure and improving nutrition situation for the crops there. And right now, we also have already the data for the potatoes of 2021, and next batch of data is coming up. And so we can say we managed to get these systems to reduce these overall yield gaps from before 30% to now nearly negligible yield gap. And this is something that is actually quite interesting to see. And this is also to answer the question of this year's Tropentag. So can agroecological approaches feed what it says? No, it even says feed the world. Yeah, okay. So yeah, so that's I wouldn't want to go that far, but still, okay. We have some indications at least here that we can show that there might be a way forward. We didn't just analyze the data from Kenya. Also, we did take a look at the data from Bolivia on cocoa, and there you can see that we have more or less two clusters. The top cluster, red and yellow, is the full sun systems, which have higher yields. And the other three are our agroforestry systems that we're working with. And but what the interesting part in here is that, for example, the green and the brown lines, so organic and conventional agroforestry, are not having significantly different yields over time. So these are systems that can be managed in both ways and get the same yield to the farmers. We are hoping that the agroforestry systems also catch up. That's why we have this big arrow here. We're thinking that the trees need a bit more years to come up. And then we hope that in 2020 and 2023, we can even show a more interesting graph here. In India, a very similar graph that you can see here on the left-hand side. This is cotton yields over time, starting in 2007 when we set up the experiments, and then going on until 2018. And there we always had the system with a light green part, which is BT cotton based. The system was performing best, and then followed by the conventional systems. And the organic systems were always lagging behind a bit in terms of pure yield. Now things changed a bit. So there were 2 pretty bad years weather-wise for the farmers there, which caused the conventional cotton production to crash completely. BT cotton also was affected due to a change in pests. The weather patterns were not matching nicely with the development of the insects anymore. And suddenly a completely different set of insects was causing trouble with the cotton. And the conventional systems were not prepared for that. Our more system approach that we are following in the organic trials was able to cope with that better. Still, we see a decrease in yield, but it is stabilizing, and we are quite looking forward to seeing this continue, this trend. And what we also did is we changed the crop rotation pattern itself. So we included some more innovations based also on the needs of the farmers. And the farmers told our partners, hey, we do need something else here. Cotton, wheat doesn't work out for us. We need a bit more. And then the idea was to integrate chickpea into this rotation pattern. And especially in years where there was a crisis, like, for example, here with cotton, this additional this additional chickpea proved a very interesting addition to the system, especially concerning profitability, because farmers were able to make quite a good income when otherwise the yields had crashed in that year. So also, what you also want to see, not just the production, but also profitability. So did it actually work out for farmers? And we can see here with data from Kenya that the high input systems do have higher total production costs on the right-hand side. That's why they are high input systems. But the interesting part is there that the gross margin for the farmers was actually better in the organic systems, summing up the whole system compared to the conventional. But one of the key learnings that we took away also from this year is that the low input system, they don't work out for farmers. So in this case, in this environment, neither the conventional low input system nor the organic low input system is actually the way forward that we can recommend to farmers to go for. And this is something where we will take a closer look at in the upcoming 5 years, because we're going to do this another 5 years, and try to improve these low input systems for farmers too. Now, I do have a conclusion here, which is my last conclusion, but it's the important conclusion, as you can hear here already. So organic agriculture can match productivity and profitability of conventional agriculture, but it does require systems-oriented farm management. So you need to be able to include more. In order to do that, you need to have training, you need to be able to transfer knowledge and work with knowledge, create knowledge with farmers, and just replacing one kind of input with the other doesn't work out. Yeah. I'll stop here. I have a few more slides, but I just stop it here, otherwise I'm getting into trouble. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for this long-term perspective on experiments. I'm very curious to see some questions, but I think I take the opportunity to have mine now, as I have not yet seen hands. Experiments. So this is mainly technical. So when we talk about agroecology, so we have also the social and the governance parts. So that is probably, I don't expect it in experiments to be really in it, but maybe in the future you will add this, or is this a plan? And okay.
Yeah, we are strongly working together on the one hand side, either with cooperatives or in these approaches of this participatory market chain development, where we try to get communities involved and where we actually get communities involved with improved production systems, while at the same time communicating these results regularly to policymakers, decision makers on different government and state community levels, to get these information more widely known and to get people talking about them. Because that is the thing that needs to happen. People need to talk about options and alternatives. And this is what we are doing very strongly in each of our 3 partner countries, with quite a lot of spin-off projects and additional funding. And yeah.
Thank you for this presentation. So I work in the Peruvian Amazon, and I just had a specific question about the graph on cacao in Bolivia.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you were using a variety that is kind of doing well under the shade, or if it's like a more conventional variety that needs, I was curious about this difference between agroforestry versus monocrop cacao.
Yeah. what you cannot see in this graph is that we are testing different varieties. So we have 9, 12. I don't know if Johanna is there. She should know that by heart. We have a different number of varieties in there, both international varieties and locally adapted varieties. And so what you're seeing here is the average of those that have not failed. So some of them actually that didn't work out, and those are not part of that graph anymore. So it's an average of between 6 to 9 different cocoa varieties we have in those trials.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I would like you to ask you in your study how you define conventional agriculture.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for us, well, what we did do as in conventional agriculture, we went for integrated concepts. So we went for what would be, at least when we take a look at these high input systems, what would be best practice in conventional agriculture. For Kenya, for example, we do have farmers practice, which is a low input system, and we do have best practice systems that combine industrial pesticides, industrial fertilizer, but also including manure and composting to it in order to make it a best practice system.
Okay, Mark, thanks a lot for presenting and for the discussion. We will make a small shift in the program that is just more practical to have all the in-person presentations first and then end with the online presentation. That is, Eric was maybe not yet really expecting his turn, but his turn is coming. And we will have very soon his presentation on it. On the desktop. So, Eric, you are in Finland, but you work with Hohenheim, with Regina. Okay, presentation here. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this lovely opportunity to share with you some work I did as part of my doctoral dissertation. It actually came, it wasn't the main topic, but it came as a really nice spin-off because I really spent a lot of months in the cocoa communities, and I really observed this very important thing, and I think it's something that's really important to raise. Really, the future of cocoa production and cocoa farmers in Ghana and also back Cote d'Ivoire seems to be at a crossroads. The main reason is that a lot of work is showing that the environmental conditions, the climatic conditions that are really required for cocoa to perform effectively is really changing very fast. And so what you see from this work by Ledrek and their colleagues shows that over the next 30 years, really a lot of places, areas that were really good for cocoa production will no longer be viable for cocoa production. But at the same time, also pest and diseases are a really big challenge to cocoa production in these areas. What you see there, some work done by the World Bank where this is the latest I could really find, just 3 main cocoa pest and diseases really just for Ghana within 3 years economically cost the country about $1.4 billion. And this is really due to cocoa swollen shoot disease and also a bit about the black pod disease and then capsids. And so what the Ghanaian government has really done to try to sort of combat this diseases over the last 20 years has been to invest heavily in pesticide use. And so Ghana has this kind of mass cocoa spraying program that was implemented where the government really essentially supplies cocoa farmers, and it has the whole governance mechanism that I'll go through a bit later. And then year in, year out, they apply lots of pesticides to the cocoa farms. But then the issue there really is that more and more, initially this program was really performing very well. Actually, when it even started, within the first 5 years, Ghana's cocoa production really increased tremendously. But more and more, it appears that the system is no longer working. And then this is not the only case, but also when you look at the broader global context, there's really this concern about the growing use of the impacts of growing use of pesticides in agriculture, for which a very recent report by the FAO, the WHO and UNDP really calls for more analysis to sort of see how some of these state subsidized schemes are really working. So this work really sought to look carefully at the kind of governance challenges that this mass cocoa spraying program that is going on in Ghana is facing, and what could really be done about it. The pictures you see below just tells you about some of the cocoa pests and diseases. On the upper left, you have the black pod, and then on the lower left, you have the capsids. And then what you see in the table there is, for example, the different types of pesticides that the government supplied to farmers under this mass cocoa spraying program in 2016. And so we started looking at this from a market failure perspective, and also really just try to understand the governance issues that are in there, but more importantly, to reflect on what we find and see what new things agroecology could bring to bear in tackling some of the issues we found. And so we really spent a lot of time in the communities, conducting a lot of process net maps, a lot of focus group discussions with cocoa farmers, and also visiting a lot of the sites to really see how things are playing out in practice. And what we see is that first, it looks like the cocoa production system is really changing. So on the left, the upper left, what you see is like a typical cocoa agroforestry system that used to be, very predominant 20, 30 years back. But now what you see more and more is what is on the right, where you have a lot of cocoa monocultures that do not even have so many trees. Farmers are no longer able to produce food crops under this cocoa like they used to do previously with what you see on the left. And in terms of implementing the mass spraying cocoa program, what we found was that the chain for supplying the pesticides to the communities, right from the cocoa board, which is in charge of cocoa production and management in Ghana, to the community has a lot of challenges. So at the district level, what happens is that ideally cocoa board should supply these agrochemicals to a task force, which then supplies it to farmers. But what we realized in the field was that very often a lot of the agrochemicals were diverted to political foot soldiers. So people who were really connected to the political party in power, and then they in turn sell these agrochemicals to farmers instead of the agrochemicals being supplied to farmers. But even then, the main mechanism that is supposed to apply the agrochemicals on the ground also, we noticed very similar things where we found that the systems were really not working. So instead of trained personnel with protective equipment and everything applying the agrochemicals and the pesticides, what we really saw was that you had farmers mixing different kinds of concoctions here and there, and not really a kind of approved agrochemicals. And so we identified our 4 main governance challenges. And here, I'm sorry for a bit for the slide overload, but the first thing really was the issue of political interferences. And we also found that the state is really not able to manage their program effectively because it's really expensive to have these agrochemicals going all the way to farmers. And then also is the issue of monitoring, where a lot of farmers told us that even ever since the program started, you don't have district officials coming down to see what exactly is going on there. And then also a lot of local elites are able to take custody of a lot of this agrochemicals and pesticides. And so what you have here is in effect what happens. So you have so many cases where the cocoa starts off very brilliantly. On the lower left, what you see is this typically when this agrochemical during the time I was there is shared, maybe a farmer gets like 2 sachets. But here is a case where one farmer has like a whole hoard, so this is like an elite who is able to just capture a lot of the agrochemicals, so others are not able to get that. And so what you see is you have several instances where there is a black pod, and in the end, you end up with the kind of picture on the upper right, and that's like cocoa beans that you can't use. So a lot of production, but the black pod disease has essentially destroyed it. The farmers told us, they told us very different ways that they felt that this program could really be changed so that they could access the agrochemicals for their production systems. Some felt that the government should stop the program completely because it's a waste of money. Some said the government should distribute the agrochemicals based on their outputs, among others. But one thing that also really came out that was very different from the actors in charge of the program was that they felt that more and more, it looks like these farmers have become hooked up on the pesticides. So they don't even really carry out the management practices that they are supposed to carry out properly because they know the agrochemicals will come. So they don't do proper thinning, proper cutting of dead branches and chupons, among others. And so based on that, I would like to sum up briefly with 3 main points. The first thing that we really saw from this work that we did was that there are multiple governance challenges, and these are very deep-rooted issues, because it looks like this agrochemical program has really even become like a kind of make or break path to winning elections, because whoever wins the elections take over the supply of these agrochemicals. But more importantly is this sort of pesticide treadmill that has really, this new attitude that has been built among farmers, where if there are no agrochemicals, there's this kind of new thinking that if I don't get the agrochemicals, I can't really produce. Whether or not this is true is another issue. But then a lot of research is showing that the mounting impacts of these 2 decades of massive, inputs of these pesticides is really beginning to take its toll. So some studies have found a lot of pesticide residue in the water sources from which these communities drink. Even some of the cocoa beans, there's now pesticide residue building up in them. And so really what this work tells us is that there's a really need for change. And I'm really happy that a lot of the previous works have actually even demonstrated how some of these things can be addressed. And for me, really, this is an entry point. And the most important thing really is to question how to really help farmers and work with them to unlearn this new practice that they've taken up, where it's all about pesticides. Without that, they feel like there is nothing. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks a lot for your presentation, and you even did not use your time. So I'm hoping for really a very lively discussion. Please prepare your questions already. I am not yet seeing Hans. I am seeing Hans.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. My question is that going from so-called conventional or agrochemical-based type of agriculture to organic, of course, it does not a simple input substitution, but requires actually training and outreach extension that's available to the farmers. Spraying is kind of an easy fix, and but organic or agroforestry is really it's a long game. And is there any kind of funding or support for training farmers in organic or agroecological approaches?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think more and more stakeholders are also beginning to realize, some of the impacts of this decades of pesticide use. So, for example, pollinator decline among others. So more and more, for example, the IITA is beginning to, pilot models where they really try to work very intensively with cocoa agroforestry, and private sector actors are also coming on board more and more, because also of this realization that just the inputs alone is not going to fix the situation. And also the real change and threats that climate change also poses to the production is a bigger problem. So more and more there's this, recognition that the change needs to happen, but funding is there's always room for expansion, because these are just very niche level innovations, and this program is, it's at the whole national level, so it doesn't really compare. And I think there's really lots of room to invest more in trying alternatives. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. I would ask, one question you are already answered, and the other question: is there like a trust of farmers to organic farming? Are they ready to convert into organic farming? So even without subsidies, or just like what's in their mind? How do they think about organic farming? Thank you.
I wish I could really speak to that, but my research really didn't look at farmers' perception about organic farming. But some other works really suggest that some farmers are willing to try, because they're also realizing very much they are losing their farms. More and more, what you even see now is the rise in small-scale mining, because after so much pesticide use and taking out all the shade trees, once the farms lose their vigor, farmers are now sort of alert to give it off for people to mine. So it's really a hot topic and a big challenge in Ghana that all stakeholders are really grappling with, and so this really long-term impact needs to be looked at. But I think there's room to research that a bit more. So yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. Availability of labor, is that something you looked at? You know, because managing a cocoa farm is highly labor intensive if you prune and do all these things. So what?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't look at that in this work, but I'm very much aware of the situation. So there's a lot of migratory labor in the cocoa production context, where you have a lot of people moving in also from the north to work during specific seasons. You have a lot of caretaker farmers. So you have a lot of owners now who reside in the city, and you know they sort of recruit people to live there and work. So the labor dynamics is it's a very varied situation, but there are people who are still working. Of course, a lot of work suggests, for example, that youth, for example, are not interested in providing labor to farms. But I think a more broader cross-sectional work recently by Malt and Co have sort of dispelled that myth that it's really quite misplaced. Yeah.
Thank you, Eric, for the presentation. I think for farmers to have an incentive to shift to organic farming, they need to have a financial incentive to do that. That means they need to be able to market their crops as organically produced. Do you know anything about the market demand on organic cocoa at the moment? Is there still a niche for them to cover?
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. So more and more there are niche initiatives that sort of try to take up. So for example, you look at around the Suhum Eastern region, you have Tony's, which is a private company based in the Netherlands that really focus on producing organic cocoa. So there are these niche level initiatives. The state itself is also really considering that to some extent. It's also something I'm looking at now in a project which I examine something we call the hotspot intervention area governance mechanism, because Ghana is using a kind of a jurisdictional approach to RED. So it wants to sort of develop this cocoa standards and integrate kind of trees. It's still evolving, so I can't really say too much about it. So the intention is there, but it's still, I think, very niche and not so much large scaled, in my opinion.
Yeah, thanks for a really nice presentation. So we are also involved with some colleagues are involved in a project that's trying to understand how to trace better products. And what you present is super interesting in terms of the type of indicators that we might be interested in knowing about. Do you know how available data like this are at a large scale, like across many farms? And if that's not available, have you got any thoughts on how those indicators could be collected on a large scale?
Yeah, thank you. I think so. It would help if you maybe shed a bit more light on the specific indicators you are looking for. But generally, Ghana has a kind of monopolized system where the Cocoa Board is really in charge of everything cocoa. And Cocoa Board is not only stationed, for example, in the capital, it has regional offices, it has district offices, it has even village offices, where it really looks at issue of quality with the beans and everything. So that mechanism is there. It's just that there are a lot of inefficiencies, but I think it's still something that could be worked with in terms of collecting that kind of broad-based data and on the kind of indicators that you might be interested in. Yeah.
Thank you. Also answering a bit to the question that Katrin has posed. So 2 months ago, one of the biggest chocolate companies in Switzerland has invited the head of the Ghana Cocoa Research Institute to Switzerland, and they were also visiting us there. And there was the head of the biggest farmers cooperative of Ghana also joining the team. And we were discussing potentials, what might be possible to get more sustainable and also more responsible ways of growing cocoa in Ghana. And I had the impression that Ghanaian officials were not really interested in that. So there is some kind of a market demand that is there, but somehow I had the impression that institutions seem to be interested in well, perhaps maintaining the situation that is there. Is that something that you also had as an impression, and what can be done about that?
You know, generally, I very much recognize, you know, COCOBOD's stand. You know, COCOBOD is it's a very powerful institution also politically, because historically, cocoa has been the backbone of Ghana, you know, until the 2010s, where we, you know, started, you know, with a bit of oil, but still cocoa remains the single most important agricultural commodity in Ghana. So it's like a baby for COCOBOD, and they are really careful. Like, until maybe 35 years ago, COCOBOD would not even acknowledge that cocoa drives deforestation, but they are very well aware. But in the public space, they don't put that out. So COCOBOD needs, you know, you can work with them, but you also really need to know how to get the politics right. Yeah, for them, really, it's about outputs, because it's about a contribution to the economy, and that's really the main driver. Everything else, I believe, with my experience with working with them and stuff, I think everything else, you know, is secondary. Of course, they're also interested, but it's, yeah, they are coming from a point which I also understand. Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot, Eric. That was a nice discussion also. Now we are coming to our last presentation, and this presentation will be given online. So we will see how this will work and whether our speaker, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Very nice. So we can also hear you. Okay. So you will then, yeah.
Can I?
Okay, you will share the screen. And yes, almost.
I need to go up to.
Yeah, you're coming in. Yes,
there.
it's almost there. Yes, now it's okay. Thanks.
Good.
Floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. And just a brief introduction. I'm a retired breeder, having worked with ECRSAT for nearly 30 years, and our work focuses very much on use of
just wait a second. Just wait a second, please. So it's not yet so easily to be heard. So can we sort of maybe? Okay, maybe. Frederick, can you do something with your microphone? Be nearer to it, or use a different type of it so that people can hear you more easily.
Can you hear me now, or I can?
Or you talk a bit more. You augment.
Yes, can you hear me?
Volume of your own voice so that you shout a little bit into the microphone.
One moment, I will try.
It's the opposite. So, running away.
I can try a microphone and see if that is better.
It's much better. Thanks.
It is better? Okay.
Yeah. Go on.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I am a retired sorghum breeder, having worked with ECRSAT for nearly 30 years. Our work focused much on use of local genetic resources and research process, breeding process, and engaging with farmers. And so today we'll look at agroecological transformation, experiences and issues with variety development of indigenous Sahelian crops in West Africa. And we'll share insights into the practices and breeding practices used by West African variety improvement programs from a study that we did this year for Miserio. And based on these findings, we will share some of the numerous opportunities for advancing agroecological transformation through the process of breeding the indigenous West African crops of sorghum, pearl millet, and cowpea. Any breeding program involves 3 technical stages in the yellow boxes, those of generating new diversity to be used for variety development, winnowing the diversity in the early generations by retaining and advancing a limited number of progenies to develop experimental varieties, and testing those to identify which merit use as new varieties. Additionally, setting the objectives for a breeding program requires not only genetic considerations, prioritization among different traits to improve, or types of varieties to breed requires deciding what kind of advantages are to be gained by whom and under what conditions the new varieties will be grown. We will look at how the West African crop breeding programs conduct these 4 stages. But first, the agroecological principles that we will focus on in this talk are participation, encouraging the social organization and participation in decision-making for advancing decentralized governance of agriculture and food systems, biodiversity, maintaining and enhancing agroecosystem diversity, and co-creating knowledge through increasing joint learning and sharing of local and scientific innovation. We did a literature review. We conducted semi-structured interviews regarding the 4 breeding stages with the sorghum, pearl millet, and cowpea breeders in 4 West African countries. We also discussed with farmer organizations that collaborate with those breeding programs and with Mesario partners in West Africa. And the initial results and conclusions were shared with the West African breeders to gain their feedback. So, to share some findings, high-level goals of West African breeding programs are set by their national research organizations. And these are quite general and do not explicitly address agroecological principles that we have mentioned. The breeding programs are giving increasing attention to prioritizing the traits that the new varieties should possess. Both formal assessments and probably more importantly, the iterative discussions between farmers and breeders during participatory variety evaluations contribute to shaping the breeding objectives. However, the dependency of these programs on short-term project funding also weighs on what they actually do. Breeders primarily are relying on farmer varieties as source material for creating new diversity. Introduced germplasm is sometimes crossed with local type varieties to increase the diversity available. This is particularly done for improving traits that have little diversity in the farmer's own varieties, and thus contributes to maintaining and enhancing local genetic diversity. The generation of new diversity in West African breeding programs is conducted by the researchers themselves and primarily meant for their own use.
Please
the breeders
speak up a
typically
little bit. I think people can't hear you so very well. Just shout a little bit more into the mic.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So the breeders typically grow out this newly created diversity at a single research station under recommended fertilization practices for all 3 crops, and for cowpea with recommended insecticide sprays. This means that the experimental varieties developed and identified through this wintering process may not come from the progeny. I'm afraid. There, sorry. And it is, okay. So through this process, the progenies developed may not come from the best adapted ones for low input farmer conditions. Breeders are frequently the deciders of which early generation progenies are retained to create new experimental varieties, and therefore greater farmer engagement in this stage could be beneficial. Several West African breeding programs are modifying their evaluation procedures. Some now use experimental fields managed for low soil fertility invite farmers on station to evaluate early generation progenies, or explore conducting on-farm nursery. All of the West African breeding programs collaborate with farmer organizations to conduct on-farm variety testing for all 3 crops in all 4 countries. Some collaborations are now going on for over 20 years. Several of these breeding programs collaborate with numerous farmer organizations such that large networks conduct varietal testing and seed activities at large geographic scales and in diverse ecosystems. The majority of on-farm variety trials are conducted by men for sorghum and pearl millet, whereas more than half of the cowpea variety trials are conducted by women. Village-level culinary trials of new varieties, in contrast, are implemented solely by women in collaboration with 4 of the breeding programs. The extent and ways that farmers join in decision-making varies in these programs. It can include choosing which type of varieties to test, the traits to evaluate, the growing conditions for the trials, and even the trial design. Annual feedback and planning meetings are one of the ways that participating farmers' contributions to decision-making is facilitated. Here are some of the various options for strengthening West African breeding programs' contributions to agroecological transformation based on the current practices and experiences. First, support long-term collaboration between farmers and breeders with emphasis on long-term, sustained collaboration. Co-creation and sharing of local and scientific innovations takes time for iterative joint learning. Furthermore, with growth over time of trust, respect, and shared understandings, roles and responsibilities can evolve for greater local participation in decision-making. Another is to strengthen farmer organization. Farmer groups that are inclusive with transparent member control and members' economic participation would favor sustainable, decentralized participation in managing genetic resources. They would also be capable partners, both for one another and for others, breeders, etc.
Frederick, please come to an end.
Yes, regarding the breeding process, start engagement of farmers and farmer organizations earlier in the breeding process. Farmers choosing early generation progenies to retain in advance is one example. This would likely increase their ownership and control of the process and the diversity of varieties produced. Another is prioritize development of new types of varieties that favor system diversification based on farmers and breeders sharing their complementary insights, and organize breeding activities so that they are conducted in conditions that better represent farmers' fields and agronomic reality. 2 parting thoughts on these options. Input and buy-in will be necessary not only from the breeding programs, but from others, such as farmer organizations, their NGO and extension partners, government and research institutions, both local and international, and donors. And these options are not just a dream, but would build on what is already in progress. I wish to thank all of the co-authors of this study whose thoughts and experiences contributed to this presentation. And I wish to also the inputs from the farmer organizations who partner with those breeding programs, the West African partners of Miserio and Miserio team in Germany. Thank you very much. And I really look forward to
Thanks, Frederick. Frederick, you heard the applause. There are quite a lot of people in this hall. So I'm now looking forward to all their questions. Preparing the mics. So one first question. So then you talked about the breeding programs and then looked into the agroecological principles. So what came first? So what is this an ongoing breeding program study? And now you're looking what the principles, how the principles can help you, or was the whole breeding program set up or to be an agroecological breeding program?
I can answer your nice question in several ways. First of all, just from our experience as breeders, we are actually new to the language of agroecology, but realize that through the approach over long term of focusing on use of and enhancing local genetic diversity and involving farmers and organizing farmers and engaging them in the research process, that it really was based very much on agroecological principles. And these principles give us now a framework for discussing this. What I presented now is a specific study conducted and commissioned by Mesodio in Germany, based on their interest in advancing agroecological development, based on interest of also providing information, insights, and products for their partners in West Africa.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm still looking into the round. Is there any further question at this stage for the work of Frederick, Eva, and colleagues? So I don't see them. So thanks a lot, Frederick, for being virtually with us. And I will now shortly wrap up our session. So maybe you have recognized, I forgot to introduce myself. So your chair has been Mariana Sigmund-Schulze. I'm German, but I'm based in the Netherlands. I'm at Wageningen Plant Research and doing their research in farming systems and food systems in the Netherlands, but also worldwide. So we have a strong international part in it and are especially interested in agroecology. And this again, also in the different environments. And you can think that the Netherlands is quite something to be done in this sense. So to wrap up our different presentations we had, so we had a set of 5 presentations. We had a look on the different approaches, and it was said, bring the approaches together. There are activities we need to, we will not invent again, but need to see how it is. So it's interesting that there is a one CGR program that is bringing that together, among other activities that are there. Then we had Sig who said, if not now, when then? So, and it's finally about people then to bring that further. We had an interesting presentation also where we then had the statement, the low input systems are still so difficult. So, and this is, we say in agroecology principles, reduce the external inputs and rely much more on the internal ones. So maybe there is still quite a lot of research also to be done. How then, how this then can work under the specific conditions we had in that presentation. Then we heard about, the new attitudes among farmers. I think that is also the mindset, so to think in a different way. So that is farmers, but it's also many different stakeholders. So, and one thing is training, but it's not just training, to think in a different way. So that is quite an effort I think we have to do generally. With the last presentations, we were diving into one aspect of it, but then again looking, so it was a and a more sort of plant breeding is a discipline of the whole, but then looking into the agroecological principles as a framework. And so that is nice, and as a framework can help us on the one hand to analyze, but that is then the researcher perspective. But the farmer perspective is then also, how can this be useful? So what is then, where are the entry points and where to look at, and not to forget different aspects. So that is, in short, a mini summary of our different presentations. Please get in touch with the different speakers and people here in the room. And let's continue working on these topics. Thanks for your attention. One very last. Is it still on?